spent like the semester. I finished my spring semester there, but afterwards I had the option to either go back to Korea for the summer, or I even thought of like finding an Airbnb or renting out a place in the Boston area or somewhere in the East Coast, so that I could avoid going back to Korea. That's how much I wanted to avoid going back, because I just felt like I would go back to my old self that I did not see myself as or associate myself with, if I relocate myself to a physical space. Because I feel like sometimes just by the virtue of being in an environment, like going back to a certain type of surrounding, it brings back your old habits, your old thought patterns, and
we want to move forward. So.
We do want to move forward. I know that a lot of seniors who graduated, who moved back to their parents' house, said that they very much feel like they've moved backwards in their life, and I really felt bad for the class of 2020 especially, because they were the first class to have been impacted by the whole pandemic first.
Right. I think it's also because for a lot of us, college is an experience where you get to have some sort of independence in
100%.
how you live and how you arrange your home. But once you move back with your parents and go back to your home country, then you have to also get adjusted and follow the
regime.
Yeah,
live under
the regime, literally.
Of your parents.
The system that's you know it's there, and like you've grown accustomed to it because you grew up under your parents. But still, like, if you've grown that mindset of independence, which is so important to becoming a real adult, I think it's so hard to really move back with your parents and try to like have it all right. But I think one of the interesting points that you brought up was how you instantly felt that New York was your home. Like, can you tell more about how that, like, I don't know, for me New York really grew on me. It wasn't like a sudden fall in love type of a situation. So I want to hear more about how your perspective was shaped and how New York changed you.
I think this is a good time. It's a very nice transition to also mention what some of the factors that make us feel at home are. For me, why I think I was mentally prepared. Like, I was just so done with high school. I was so ready to move on from that
drama
period
anymore.
No high school, like childish vengeance and vendettas, and I just hated that toxic kind of mind space to be in. And I just told myself, like, New York is going to be a new start, a fresh new blank slate. I'm going to design my life however I want to be, however I want to live as. And I think there was one of the moments that really, like, kind of made me realize that I'm an actual adult is when I was on a trip with two of my friends from college, from high school. We went to travel together after getting admitted to during our summer break, right? And there's a moment when one of my friends, a really good friend called Avery, she said, I'm gonna have like chocolate cake for breakfast. Fuck it, I'm an adult. And like,
being a real adult.
Exactly. As a 17-year-old, like, that phrase was extremely eye-opening and like refreshing for me, because I knew that, like, legally I was turning 18 and like I'm gonna be an adult in Korean, like I was 20 years old, so that is an adult. But I never really thought that adult equaled I make my own decisions equal I can eat breakfast, chocolate cake for breakfast.
I love that example.
I love it so much. And that's when I just instantly realized, wow, this really means I get to define how I want to live. There is no one else in my life to meddle with the ways of my life. Like, there's no mom who tells me you have to eat, like apple for breakfast, yogurt and whatever, all these healthy things. There's no one to wake me up in the morning. let alone stop me from eating chocolate cake in the morning. So I think that's when I really enjoyed having that sense of independence. And, you know, after I moved into New York, it was like just as I've imagined and mentally prepared myself for. I can wake up whenever I want to. I have classes accordingly to the schedule that I knew what I was getting into. It was no longer like 9 to 3 or whatever the school system set as. And no one would tell me you have to do this or that. I would just go to the library whenever I felt like it and leave it whenever I was done. I just, the sense of independence there was refreshing.
Right.
But also, I think one of the major factors that made me feel at home was finding my tribe, my crowd, you know. I joined an international student orientation program that our university had offered for the freshman students. And during that week of, we call it ISOP, I met all these amazing people from all over the world. And going, you know, like during the new student orientation program, you know how like people feel insecure to find their friends and stuff. We always joke how since we started school before the rest of the freshman class had, we had a sense of like friendship and community, so we didn't feel as insecure about like having to find friends and like pretending like we like each other and like talking to all these people in your same floor just because you feel like you would miss out on something otherwise. So I think what really unlike some of the dorm friendships, you know, the same dorm friendships or new student orientation program group friendships that had formed, what made our friendship, like the international students friendship, really strong and genuine was that we all were people who were outside of the US, who came from the US as outsiders and who were willing and eager to adjust to this country as you know, newcomers, people with a dream and
interact with more people.
Yeah, like we didn't have anyone we know in this country, so we were just slightly more desperate. I guess that's okay. Maybe that's not true, but we all had a sense of understanding for each other. We understood. Even if, you know, we didn't speak perfect English, we understood even if someone had an accent or someone didn't know how to set up a phone plan. I mean, we all helped each other out. Like, if someone had opened a bank account, we would give each other tips or, like, help each other out. And I think, and we would also all share, like, our different backgrounds and upbringing. And for me, that was the most fascinating part to understand why this person acts that way. Oh, it's because she comes from a different cultural upbringing. And I think I just fell in love with the diversity and the richness of the different backgrounds. And that's when I felt like I found home here.
Wow.
It was the melting pot aspect of New York City, I would say.
I think for me, home, people is also important in my definition of home, but I think family is very important when it comes to like the values associated with home. When I was growing up, I didn't really have my dad around because he was always so busy with his work, and because he's a civil engineer, like he had to also like move around with his construction sites being changed every 2 to 3 years. Sometimes he would live in a different location from my mom and me, and he would just come to our house for the weekends. And growing up, I didn't really feel like my family was a whole family. Like, if you know what I mean, I felt like there was something missing from how we lived, and yeah, like there wasn't that sense of community in my family, I guess. Also because I'm an only child, so basically it was just me and my mom and sometimes my dad. So I guess internally I have this like longing for my home with, you know, all of my mom and dad together. And even when I was in college, that made me feel like I wanted to be with my family as a whole. And yeah, whenever I had some ups and downs while I was living alone, I would think of my home and my parents and just be homesick, but in a good way, you know? Like, for instance, go out for Korean food or and video call with my parents, and those things of connecting with like familiar things made me feel like, oh wow, like I have a home. And right now I'm not home yet, and I'm pursuing my dreams, but when I get back home, I'm gonna have this relaxed feeling and I'm gonna be with my parents. I think the main difference between Jian and my perspectives on home is that I guess my notion is more traditional. When I think of home, I think of things that are familiar to me and the things that I grew up with from my childhood. But for Jian, because you're such a driven person and you really pursue change for the good in the future, you really I guess incorporated those people that you've met in your life into your notion of home.
I think that's really accurate. Like, home is where I am now, how I define myself now, as opposed to what I guess the traditional definition of home is, like your childhood, where you grew up and where your values were cultivated. Yeah, so I think I try to have a more dynamic and I try to feel at home where I am. In fact, I thought that my new definition of home was in New York City until I would say around freshman year, sophomore year of college. And then I started traveling solo backpacking a lot. And, you know, wherever I went, I felt
awesome,
like
though.
I was at home. I didn't miss New York City. I didn't feel homesick at all.
Like even in like lodges and hostels.
Yes, exactly. Exactly in hostels and exactly at other people's houses. Like the people that I would meet on the streets. Now this is kind of dangerous, but you know, my interviewees' houses. Some people are kind enough to invite me to their families' houses. And
that's so nice.
You know, like I would be outside of the city, New York City, for a few weeks, even like the longest time was 2 months. I would be outside just traveling for 2 months, over 2 months actually. It was almost 3 months, but I would always feel at home. Like I would feel so comfortable. And that's when I realized, wow, I am at home in my own body temple. Like I am at home as long as myself is with me here. So that was like my grand definition of home. I am at home wherever I am because I am in tune with myself. I'm in touch with my inner self. But then the pandemic hit and I could not feel at home anywhere, wherever I went. I did not feel at home in New York City when all of my friends fled back to their home countries, back to their home cities. I did not feel home in that ghost city.
Do you think it's because COVID-19 really like forced you to stop those interactions that you were having and sort of you know, create some distance with your connections?
Actually, that might be it as well. I always thought that it's because my friends left the city. Most people left the city at that time, around March. There wasn't that many people on the streets. But also, I felt extremely lonely when I was in my uncle's house, like physically neighboring him as well. I even with that kind of, well, it was a minimal communication, but still I didn't feel connected at all. Now I'm in Korea and I face my parents every day, my family, my brothers every single day, but I still don't feel at home. I think then that's when it shattered my definition of just firstly thinking that New York City was my home.